At 3 a.m., my sister took my keys. By morning, my new SUV was destroyed. When I tried to speak, my mother yelled, "Stop accusing her." I didn't argue, because it wasn't my car she crashed, it was my mother's. My name is Natalie Brooks. I'm 32, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one. I paid my own tuition, covered my own rent, and never asked for help. After my father died, that role became permanent. My sister Lila was suddenly too fragile, and my mother decided the rest of us needed to bend around her. That night was quiet. Too quiet. I woke up because I heard the front door open and close softly, like someone trying not to be noticed. I reached for my keys on the counter. They weren't there. I knew immediately who had taken them. Lila had been drinking earlier, laughing too loud, stumbling a little. I thought about stopping her. I didn't. I told myself it wasn't my job anymore to parent my younger sister. By morning, my phone was blowing up. Police lights reflected off the walls of my apartment. Outside, an SUV lay crumpled against a streetlight. My mother arrived before I could even speak, already crying, already defensive. She hugged Lila tightly and turned on me like I was the threat. "How dare you accuse her?" she shouted, right in front of the officers. I stood there quietly, staring at the wreck. Something felt wrong. The damage was bad, but that wasn't it. I stepped closer and looked through the windshield. That's when I saw it. The VIN number on the dashboard didn't match the one on my insurance paperwork. My stomach dropped, but my face stayed calm. Everyone kept talking over each other. Lila claimed she didn't remember anything. My mother said the car must have been stolen and returned. I didn't correct them. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain what I had noticed. I realized then that the truth had never mattered in my family. Loyalty only went one way. So I did the only thing that had ever protected me. I stayed quiet, paid attention, and let them believe they were still in control. In my family, there was an unspoken rule that never changed. Lila was always protected, no matter what happened. After my father died, my mother decided that Lila needed constant care, while I needed to be strong enough for everyone. That decision shaped everything that followed. While Lila was excused for her mistakes, I was expected to deal with the fallout. When she fell behind on rent, I stepped in. When she caused problems, they were quietly handled and forgotten. My mother always had reasons ready. Lila was overwhelmed. Lila needed support. I was told to stay calm, to be understanding, to keep the peace. Over time, my role shifted without anyone asking. I became the person who handled problems, sorted documents, and made sure things didn't fall apart. No one checked if it was fair. It was simply assumed I would manage it because I always had before. The SUV fit perfectly into this pattern. I believed it represented my independence, something I had earned through consistency and hard work. In reality, it was another layer of control. My mother had placed the car in her own name, using my stability to secure it while keeping the final authority. I trusted her without question, never imagining that trust could be used against me. That realization cut deeper than the accident itself. It showed me how easily my effort was taken for granted. My mother kept control, my sister kept protection, and I carried the responsibility. That was when I finally understood the truth. This was never about one mistake or one incident. It was about a family system that rewarded recklessness and depended on my silence to survive. By the next day, a new story was already in motion. Lila said the SUV had been stolen, and my mother repeated it without hesitation. She told the police, the insurance company, and even the neighbors who gathered outside. The details changed slightly each time, but the message stayed the same. Lila was a victim, not the cause. I listened as the truth was reshaped right in front of me. Timelines were adjusted. Questions were ignored. My mother spoke with confidence, as if saying something firmly enough could make it real. People nodded along because it was easier to believe her than to challenge her. I didn't interrupt. I waited. When the moment felt right, I calmly mentioned that a nearby store had security cameras facing the street. I explained that the footage showed exactly when the SUV left and who was driving. I didn't raise my voice or accuse anyone. I simply stated a fact. My mother reacted instantly. She cut me off in front of everyone and told me to stop causing trouble. She said I was confused, emotional, and making things worse. Her words were sharp, but her message was clear. Evidence was not welcome if it pointed in the wrong direction. That was when something finally settled in my mind. This situation was never about facts or fairness. It was about loyalty, and my loyalty had never been the one she wanted. The truth could stand right in front of her, and she would still turn away if it threatened the story she chose to protect. In that moment, I stopped trying to explain myself. I stopped hoping to be understood. Instead, I started paying attention. I watched how quickly lies were defended and how easily my voice was dismissed. I realized that silence, for the first time, gave me clarity. And clarity showed me exactly how this family really worked. I told my mother I would help sort things out. She didn't question it. I had always been the one who handled details, so it felt normal to her. I contacted the insurance company and asked careful, neutral questions, acting like I was just trying to move the process forward. That call changed everything. The policy was not shared. It was fully in my mother's name, from the coverage to the payout. Any money from the claim would go directly to her, not to me, and not to fix what had been damaged. Hearing that made something click. This situation had been structured long before the accident ever happened. I remembered quiet conversations with my father from years ago. He used to warn me that control often hides in paperwork, not in arguments. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. Now I did. Ownership, signatures, and policies decided power, not emotions. Instead of reacting, I stayed calm. I asked for copies of everything. Policy records, call logs, written statements. I noted dates, times, and small details that others overlooked. Every document told part of a larger story, and I wanted to see it clearly from start to finish. I didn't confront anyone with what I learned. There was no benefit in that. I focused on understanding where I stood and how exposed I might be if things went wrong. The more I read, the more I realized how easily responsibility could be shifted onto me if I wasn't careful. So I began organizing everything quietly. I saved emails, kept notes, and matched statements to timelines. This wasn't about proving someone else was wrong. It was about making sure I was protected. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to chaos. I was preparing for it, and that shift made all the difference. After the insurance call, I made a conscious decision to step back. I stopped rushing to fix everything, stopped answering every question before it was fully asked. I stayed polite, I stayed present, but I no longer carried the weight of their problems for them. My mother seemed unsettled by my quiet. She looked for reactions that weren't coming. My sister, on the other hand, became frustrated quickly. She was used to me solving things before anyone else had to, and now she was forced to face delays and consequences she could not control. Bills went unpaid longer than usual. Letters from the bank and the insurance company stacked up. Calls went unanswered. Normally, I would have handled them all before anyone noticed, but now I waited, letting them pile naturally. The tension in the house grew, and I watched without interference. Every question my mother asked, I answered calmly and briefly, giving no extra help. My tone was steady, but my words were limited. Lila tried to provoke me into taking charge again, but I didn't respond. The more they struggled, the clearer it became that they had relied on my intervention for too long. I realized that silence could be a tool. By not reacting, I allowed situations to unfold as they were, revealing patterns no one wanted to see. My restraint made them believe I was passive, even weak, but in truth, I was observing and calculating. For the first time, I wasn't solving problems to keep the peace. I was letting natural consequences happen, quietly protecting myself while they floundered. It was uncomfortable for them, but it was necessary. The calm I maintained became my own shield, and in that silence, I found a new sense of control. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer to make sense of everything quietly. As we went through the documents, The truth hit harder than I expected. My mother had used my credit history and income to secure several assets, including the SUV that was supposedly mine. Everything I thought I owned was tangled in her control. The lawyer explained that if the accident had gone differently, I could have been held responsible. The realization made my stomach tighten. It wasn't just a car anymore, it was a legal trap I hadn't seen coming. What I had assumed was independence was actually leverage she had built over years. I left the office with a mixture of anger and clarity. This wasn't just family drama, it was financial betrayal, carefully hidden beneath everyday life. Every payment I made, every effort I invested, had quietly reinforced her control. The accident revealed just how much she had manipulated the situation without anyone noticing. I made a choice then. I wouldn't confront my mother or my sister directly. Arguments would change nothing, and blame would only keep me tied to their chaos. Instead, I decided to let the consequences play out through the proper channels. Legal processes don't care about excuses, and I would make sure my side was documented and protected. I spent the next days organizing records, confirming claims, and making sure every detail was in order. I wasn't seeking revenge, and I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was creating a shield for myself, letting the system handle what they had set in motion. For the first time, I felt a sense of distance and control. I could step back without fear because the truth was now on my side, and I would no longer be the one carrying the weight of their choices. The insurance company called with unexpected news. Because of the conflicting statements, the claim was denied. I had anticipated delays, but this was more than that. The inconsistencies in the story had caught up with them. Soon after, the police reopened the investigation, asking questions that made my mother and sister shift uncomfortably. Lila struggled to keep her story straight. Every time she spoke, small contradictions slipped out, and the pressure started to show. My mother grew angry, turning to me with accusations I hadn't expected. She claimed I was interfering, that I was trying to sabotage the family. Her voice was sharp, her words meant to intimidate, but I didn't react with anger. I calmly gathered the documents I had prepared. Timestamps, records, statements, and footage. I handed them over to the authorities, showing exactly what had happened without comment or judgment. I wasn't there to argue, to defend myself to my family, or to prove them wrong in front of anyone who might be watching. My goal was simple: clarity and accountability. For the first time, my mother saw that I wasn't following the role she had written for me. I wasn't the one who would quietly fix problems or protect Lila's mistakes. I was simply ensuring the truth was visible to the people who mattered. Watching her realization settle over her was strange. There was no yelling, no dramatic confrontation, just understanding. I had stepped out of the script I had been forced to follow for years, and the consequences of their choices were beginning to catch up. That day marked a shift. I was no longer just a witness. I was someone who would let facts speak, letting the system handle the rest. For the first time, the story wasn't theirs to control. The days that followed felt surreal. Letters from lawyers arrived daily, and the weight of legal proceedings pressed heavily on the household. My mother's accounts were frozen, and for the first time, she had to navigate consequences without sheltering herself or my sister. Lila couldn't hide behind excuses anymore. She faced reality in a way she had never experienced before, and the tension in the house was palpable. I watched quietly as the familiar rhythm of control and excuses started to collapse. There was no celebration in my heart, no sense of triumph. It was strange, almost painful, to see the people who had always seemed untouchable now struggling under their own choices. Each argument, each frustrated phone call, and each official letter chipped away at the illusion of stability my mother had maintained for so long. Still, I remained calm and steady. I didn't intervene or offer help. I simply observed, noting how their reaction shifted, how fear and frustration replaced confidence and certainty. It was an education in human behavior, in the consequences of long-held patterns and unexamined favoritism. Amid the chaos, I felt a surprising clarity. I realized that revenge, the kind that comes from anger, doesn't carry satisfaction. What mattered more was that truth was finally visible. The household that had always relied on selective narratives and protection could no longer hide from reality. It was not about victory or punishment. It was about seeing things as they truly were, and allowing that reality to exist without my interference. For the first time, I felt distance from the constant burden of fixing everything. I could watch without judgment, without attachment, and simply recognize the patterns I had endured for years, finally unraveling on their own. My mother called me into the study, her voice quieter than usual, trembling in a way I had never heard before. She didn't apologize. She didn't admit mistakes. Instead, there was a tension that carried urgency, a need I had ignored for years. She wanted me to fix it one last time, to step in and shield her and Lila from the consequences that had finally arrived. I listened without interrupting. I could feel the weight of expectation pressing against me, but I stayed steady. For a long moment, she searched my face for the familiar compliance she had always received, the one that had allowed her to act without accountability. Then I spoke, clearly and calmly. I told her that love without respect was meaningless. I explained that I could not erase the consequences she had ignored for so long, and I would not take responsibility for choices that weren't mine. My tone was measured, without anger or accusation. I wasn't there to punish or lecture. I was there to set a boundary that could not be crossed. She looked stunned, as if this was the first time she realized I would not follow the script she had written. There was a silence that stretched, heavy but necessary, filled with the truth that had long been buried beneath favors, excuses, and expectations. For the first time, I was fully present for myself. I chose my own limits without cruelty, without drama, and without granting forgiveness that hadn't been earned. I wasn't severing the family, but I was reclaiming my role in it. In that quiet moment, the balance of power shifted. I had stopped being the fixer, the protector, and the silent witness. I had become my own person, and for the first time, I felt fully unbound. Life after that night felt different in a way I had been waiting for but never dared to expect. I focused on building stability for myself, making decisions without hesitation, and relying only on what I had earned. Financial independence became more than a goal. It was a safeguard, a clear line between my life and the chaos I had carried for years. My sister could no longer hide behind excuses. The choices she had made finally caught up with her, and she had to face consequences that my mother had once shielded her from. It wasn't about punishment, it was about accountability, something that had been absent for far too long. My mother, too, experienced the results of her decisions. Favoritism and manipulation left a mark that no apology could erase. She had built her family around selective loyalty, and now she had to live with the reality that her control had limits. Looking back, I realized the SUV was never the real issue. What truly broke that night was the illusion of family loyalty I had believed in. Years of compromise, of taking responsibility for things that weren't mine, had created a fragile structure. It took a crash for the truth to surface, and for me to see clearly. Walking away required letting go, not of anger, but of expectation. I didn't need to repair what had already failed. I only needed to protect myself and move forward. For the first time, I felt free to live without interference, without guilt, and without the burden of carrying everyone else's mistakes. The destruction of the car was the moment I finally allowed myself to exist fully, and that clarity became the foundation of a life that belonged entirely to me.